So my name is Ted Deering. I'm the Assistant City Manager for the City of Battle Creek. And we are here today holding the second of our Development Area Citizens Council meetings. And we've got a lot of folks with us this week. We appreciate all of you coming out. For those of you that don't know, the Development Area Citizens Council is a board that's put together to act as an advisory committee to the Downtown Development Authority as they update their development plan. I was talking with some of you before the meeting. The Downtown Development Authority has not updated their development plan in quite a few years, almost 30 years. And so they've got a new list of projects that they have put together to update their development plan, and we have been working through that process. Again, the DACC is an advisory board made up of citizens who actually live within the authority boundaries, who can participate on this particular committee. We had one meeting back in June. We've got a meeting this week and a meeting next week as well. We've got a relatively short agenda today. For those that are interested in the information that was presented back in June, if you go to the city's YouTube page, you can watch that meeting. We did live stream it and record it, so if you're interested in any of that information. And there's a lot of background information in that meeting about the DDA, TIF districts, and this particular development plan as we work through the process of updating it. So please feel free to watch that if you got an opportunity, if you're interested in doing that. Quickly, before we get started, we're going to do a quick roll call. I do want to just acknowledge something quickly, if I could. One of our members, Marge Breitbach, who was a part of this committee, unfortunately, Marge passed away in the last couple of weeks, and she will be greatly missed. Marge's contributions to the community, to the community, and with her business downtown were great assets to Battle Creek. So I wanted to acknowledge Marge in her passing. So thank you for just maybe joining me in a quick moment of silence for Marge. Thank you. I appreciate that. We'll have a brief roll call here in just a second. We don't have a quorum today. We've had a few folks, it looks like, who have not been able to join us last second, but we can go ahead with our meeting. We do have approval of minutes on our agenda, but we'll go ahead and plan to do that next week when the group meets again, and hopefully we'll have a quorum at that point. But we can go ahead with our meeting. We want to make sure the folks who have showed up here today have an opportunity to do public comment, and we will have public comment on our agenda. And obviously we want to hear comments and questions from our review committee as well. We distributed the plan and the projects at our June meeting, and hopefully folks have had an opportunity to look at some of those. We want to answer questions that you might have and obviously receive your comment today as well as comment from members of the public. So I'm first going to ask the clerk's office to do a quick roll call.
Christina Smith.
Here.
John Bensix.
Here.
Shazan Tomczyk. He's not here. Carol Fix.
Here.
Carrie Kirkham. Not here. Mark Barber. Denasia Henderson. And Kevin Patrick.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to move right past approval of the minutes. We'll do that at our next meeting. We'll move right on to member review and comment. And I'll ask any of our DACC members who are here for any questions and comments that you might have at this time. If you've got questions that we can't answer today, we'll be sure and get those answers together and send them out to you. And otherwise, if you've got comments, we'll record those in the minutes, and obviously they'll be included in our summary of comments when we meet next week. So are there any members of the committee that have any questions or comments at this time?
I do.
Okay.
First off, I want to make sure that the purpose of today's meeting is to voice questions and record them, or can the questions be answered? Or does this require a different venue to get the questions answered? If the questions are answered, do you have the authority to give a adequate answer, or does that need to come from someone else?
Yeah. So The City of Battle Creek is the administrative entity for the DDA, so there probably are questions that we can answer. Depending on the nature of the question, if we cannot answer it, we can take that to the appropriate authority. I don't know, John, I go to wait and see what kind of questions that you have, whether they are the kind of questions that would have to be answered through an action of the board. If that was the case, obviously the board would have to take those on. But administratively, hopefully we can answer questions. And again, anything that we can't answer, we'll plot a course for answering that question.
Sure. Yeah. Most of my comments or questions regard the Capitol Avenue, Goguak Lake. Okay. Do you have a market study or a feasibility study that can be shared?
No, we don't. And actually, I think if you'll notice, for the Capitol Avenue Southwest subdevelopment area, that is one of our top priorities, is to actually do I guess what I would call a sub-area plan of that stretch, because we don't really have any planning right now for how that could be developed other than the city's master plan and the land use plan that's already in place for the city from a zoning perspective. So, yeah, again, I think we'd like to.
So for the development of the northern part of the lake, there was no study done.
Oh, okay. So the Southwest Capitol.
Okay, I'm talking about.
You're talking about the north.
Columbia Avenue.
Okay.
I'm strictly. All of my questions are strictly going to be tied to the north end of the lake.
Yeah. No. When the city did its master plan, roughly about 5 years ago, we asked the consultant who was working on the planning process to do a conceptual drawing of the north end of the lake based on a reimagining of the lake as a bit more of a destination retail location for Columbia Avenue that was more tourist or resort oriented and less of what it is right now, which is just kind of a hodgepodge of business and commercial uses. So the sub-area plan that we shared with the group back in June was their conceptual drawing, and again, it's just a conceptual drawing at this point, of a reimagining of what the north end of the Goguak Lake area could look like. None of that is anything other than conceptual at this point, but it does reflect a desire to rethink that end of the lake so that when you go down Columbia Avenue, for example, you can identify quickly that there is an asset there and that the retail and the activity in that area are more reflective of a lakefront style retail corridor than what we currently have. But beyond that conceptual drawing, there's really nothing in place right now.
So if I understand you correctly, that is strictly concept and there is no plan to move forward at this point with the development of that area. Is that correct?
Yeah, we really don't have anything more than a conceptual drawing at this point.
Before you decide to move forward, is the city going to do some type of feasibility study or research to determine whether it is viable to create additional housing there, to remove homes along the lake and turn basically a size of a football field into a beach that is a public beach?
Yeah, I would certainly expect.
And the type of businesses that would be drawn to not a touristy type city. Now, my understanding was that the concept was to have something that was similar to South Haven, which is a totally different concept of a city than Battle Creek. So I would really like to see the city do some type of research study done to see if it does really make sense to develop the north end of the lake that is in this concept drawing. And that kind of goes to my next statement. If the vision of Battle Creek is to be an extraordinary community where people choose to live and work and play, what role does this project play in helping achieve this vision? Families choose to live where they can work and where their children receive a quality education and have quality extracurricular experiences. What other plans are in place to support these parts of the vision? Okay. And then what things would you call out as extraordinary about Battle Creek that aren't being leveraged or focused upon at this point?
Yeah.
Okay. So getting back to before, I hope before the city decides to do something to the north end of the lake, that they do some type of constructive research project to make sure that it is a viable solution to what the city has as a vision for, and it's my understanding to the first meeting I attended, which was last month, that you want to try and draw people here to live and work. So will putting in a public beach do that? Okay, so I really hope the city does some type of a study. My question is outlining that particular project. I'd like to get them recorded so that if by any chance it does start to move forward, these are recorded. What does the city think that making a larger beach in addition to the current Willard Beach will draw people? Okay. How does the beach access impact the vision significantly enough for people to choose to live and play here? Okay. There are current issues with the boat dock drawing people after hours, the current public launch, leaving trash, and who will police the beach area for those issues? Willard Beach is a closed beach at, I think, 8 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah, at dusk, yeah.
Okay, or dusk. This beach is a public beach. That is what is proposed in the concept. There will be no policing if you have a public beach to have people removed at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay, and by putting a sign up, I don't think it's going to take care of that issue. So that's a major concern for me, and I'm sure it is for some of the other shareholders or stakeholders that live along that part of the lake. Current condo boat docks. In the plan, Hiawatha's aren't there, but I don't think they are going to be impacted by that. Bay Tower and Bay Village, our boat docks are right where the beach is. I didn't see where, if this plan goes through, that there would be some sort of a compensation for our docks being removed and being placed somewhere else. Is that something that would happen if this were to move forward?
Yeah,
You probably can't answer that question.
Yeah, I probably can't answer that question.
Right,
at the
that's
time.
right,
Yeah.
okay, all right. So my concern is for boat docks, for the existing condo owners. That's one reason we chose to pick that area to retire in. Most of the people that live in these condos are retirees. If the building of multifamily homes generates more interest in boat docks, again, kind of tying with that, where would the docks to support additional individuals living close to the water be installed, in addition to the current lake property owners that have dock access and may lose it? If the goal is to create more access to views of the lake for people living close to the lake, then how does getting access to the lake happen? Or will the project create an untenable problem with people wanting access and are not being able to have access to the lake for boating? The areas outlined in the plan really doesn't match actual area availability. So I'm really curious as to how the designer created that, okay? Specifically in question, adding an access road between Columbia Avenue and the condos. Businesses on Capitol doesn't appear to be possible, okay? Unless the parking behind the condos on Columbia were to be eliminated. And it really doesn't seem to be a realistic concept. Traffic congestion on Capitol Avenue. And multifamily homes and businesses are added by the lake as outlined in the plan. Getting onto Columbia Avenue currently is challenging. The added vehicles needed to access Capitol and Columbia will cause additional congestion. And then what businesses are you envisioning, probably tying back to some type of a study, what businesses are you envisioning will be drawn here as outlined in the plan, i.e. corporate offices, or what commercial development could be successful on Columbia Avenue? And then my last question, is the probability of this happening real?
Yeah. So all very good questions. Not all questions that we can answer at this time, right? Because we haven't necessarily dug into what a specific development plan might look like for that area. What we know right now is that what could or can happen there is based on current zoning. So anything beyond that would require, I would agree, additional planning by the city or the DDA in this case, if they were going to invest in any other vision for what the end of the north end of Goldwack Lake would look like. I can say that the purpose of the development committee of council is to raise these questions, and so your comments here today are very relevant, and they're the types of comments that we would then pass on to the DDA so the board can consider those comments in the development of the plan, and they could direct staff, for example, to say, okay, we would not move on that unless we completed this study or that study or whatever would be appropriate for moving a project forward on the north end of the lake. But I think we also recognize too that we wouldn't really advance any activities there unless there was some type of an engagement process with the folks both living there and in the community before we moved forward with anything. So I think a lot of the questions you're answering would probably get developed and answered during the process. But at this point, again, other than a conceptual idea that the lake itself is an asset to the community and could be leveraged differently than it's currently being leveraged, is something that I think the DDA would like to pursue if it makes sense. But we have nothing more concrete at this time other than a conceptual idea.
Okay. How will we be informed if the city decides to pursue activity on the north end of the lake? I only knew about this because I answered the letter that came in asking if I wanted to be on this committee. Prior to that, I had no way of finding out, if this meeting was going to take place or if future meetings will take place. I know in the information that you've given us that I think it's X number of days you publicly announce when meetings are. What's the venue for citizens to find out how we can get involved in discussions or future discussions of things that may affect where we live?
Yeah, and good questions. And there are ways that you can get information about the city and the meetings that we hold, and they're generally available on our website. You can sign up for alerts from the city of Battle Creek, so when public meetings are taking place, we can alert you by, say, text, for example. But I think what I can commit to you today, and we've got a lot of folks here, I think, who are from the north end of the lake, too, is that the city and the DDA would not likely be interested in advancing on any kind of plans that weren't led off by some type of a public engagement process. And I will share with you just the DDA's commitment as it relates to this committee. You are not actually required by statute to form a DACC prior to amending your development plan. But it is an option that you had, and the board was very committed to getting some public engagement through this process and wanted to go through the Development Area Council process. And so I think I can commit on behalf of the board, and I realize that I won't be around forever, but that they are very committed to going through engagement processes on these larger projects like this before anything happens. And we recognize the impact on the north end of the lake. The DDA is not a property holder in that area. Most of those properties are privately held, and obviously folks would have to be intimately involved in whatever plan developed for that area. So. I would expect that the best way would be to be informed would be, follow the city's website, know that the DDA meets quarterly, but that the DDA is going to reach out to you to engage you in these processes before any larger project moves forward.
Has there, I noticed in the information that you don't call it eminent domain, but it says the same thing. When was the last time that the city has activated or not activated? What's the word I'm looking for? Yes.
Okay, I'm not quite sure I caught the question. Ask that again, if you would.
In the information you gave us, the city has the right to take public or take private property.
Yeah.
Okay. When was the last time the city actually acted on that?
Wow, that's a good question. I would say, of course, I'm not the sole source of knowledge on that,
Okay.
but I can say I have been around the city for a while. I cannot recall a taking of land in that manner any time in the last 25 years. Although if I was going to guess when it last happened, I think that it's possible that it happened when the Emmett Street overpass was built, what we call Veterans Memorial Bridge. I believe that there were some properties associated with that construction project, which would have been mid-90s, where that may have occurred. But I can say with fairly good certainty that the city hasn't done it since then. I would not envision a scenario where on the north end of Gogwag Lake, the city would come in and take property. I don't envision that scenario, but I'm just one person, so, yeah.
I'm just asking the question because it is in here that the city can do that.
Yeah, then certainly does have that authority. That is not a tool that the city would normally like to employ.
Ted, if I may say something, I do know that when they put the family fair in, those homes and small businesses on Grand Boulevard and on Columbia, those individuals were all offered buyouts. And I live in that area, so we had quite a few heated discussions with Neighborhood Inc. and several in here. And so the developer had to meet our requirements and our needs because we didn't back down. And we were maybe 5 homes, but buyouts were offered to everyone, and they took the buyouts.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that was the developer that was actually,
Yes.
not the city, right? Yeah, okay.
And if I can interject, I don't believe at this time there is a developer, and I just wanted to remind people, especially on the lake, if they remember, there was a few years ago, I can't tell you if it was 3 or 4, where there was interest in where the old restaurant is.
Right.
In developing that into apartments and putting a small restaurant in there. And at the time, it was zoned commercial. And so it was rezoned to residential. And many of us meant at that time, because we didn't want to see apartments in that area, because that whole section of the lake is all condominiums. And everyone there, to my knowledge, pretty much owns and stays in their own condo. There are a few that are leased, but not many. The apartment problem can be difficult if they don't start out at screening and having a high enough rate to have the apartment, then those things tend to go down and that affects everything else. So most of us were concerned that we would continue on with some kind of a condo idea to make it and keep it similar to what it is.
Yeah, and that's a good point to share too. And as I mentioned a little earlier too, what could happen at that site now would be whatever the current zoning would allow it at that site, right? If a developer was interested in doing something that wasn't consistent with the current zoning, then there would be a process. Whether they had to get conditional rezone or they requested a flat-out rezone or whatever, there would be a public process that involved both the Planning Commission and the City Commission before any kind of project could move forward.
Well, that brings up a question then for me is, it's whatever it's zoned. So the 2 homes that are there right now where the proposed beach is, how is that zoned?
I don't have a land use or a zoning map right in front of me right now.
Should be residential.
So so it should be residential,
Yeah.
right? So then, based off of that comment, a beach couldn't go in there, is that correct?
I would imagine, I'm going to have to look in the, we'd have to look in the zoning code to see what's allowed in that particular zoning designation. So if something is zoned residential, for example, and we've got a couple of different levels of residential, right, that distinguish between single family versus multifamily, that kind of thing. Typically, if you look in our zoning code, you can see then under that particular zoning designation, what types of usage would be allowed. I wouldn't assume, once again, I don't have it in front of me, I wouldn't assume necessarily that a public beach would be part of a residential zoning district, but there are certain things that are allowed, for example, by special use. And if something is allowed by special use, then obviously that's a process, just like a conditional rezoning or something along those lines too. So it is, when you go to the city's website and you look at our zoning code, it's pretty, it's long, right? But it's fairly user friendly, and you can see each zoning district and then what is allowed by right within that district, and then what could be allowed, say, by special use. And so we would want to look at whatever the zoning was for that property, and that would give you a good sense of what could be potentially built without going through the city of Battle Creek, and that's what we mean by right, for example, versus where you would need a special use permit, or if that particular use wasn't allowed in that zoning district, then you would need to go another route if you'd wanted to do a project there.
Those are all of my questions. Chris, yeah.
Other questions or comments by the group? Carol, I know you had some comments about waterways and rivers, and I think we
Well,
clarified most of those.
Yes, and I thank you for clarifying, and for everyone, it was based upon the sub-areas, and then when we get into the projects, there was money basically allocated for, let's say, for example, Southwest Capitol linear path. Well, there's no linear path. So instead of showing, we needed to have clarification in what we have in each sub-area, whether it's the north side, core downtown, Southwest Capitol, or the lakefront. And so that's what some of the comments were, we clarified, and there's changes made from our last meeting that actually indicates which areas have a linear path or which areas are actually on the river or waterfront, and so those changes were made and incorporated and are available in today's meeting for review, and they're in there, and I appreciate it.
Great, thank you. Yeah, this map might be helpful for you. I can't see it right here, but right above my head here. This will give you a sense. The area in yellow represents the Downtown Development Authority boundaries. And as you can see, it extends well beyond what we would consider the core downtown. And you can see that we have broken up the district into seven sub-development areas, and they cover a lot of territory. You can see, you know, generally the middle of that yellow cluster is what we would consider the core downtown, and you can see it goes north all the way up to the hospital in KCC. It goes west all the way to the city limits along the West Michigan corridor. It goes east, as you can see. So that map right there will show you the core downtown area and the south downtown area. Why don't you advance that again, if you would. Go to the next slide, and then go one more. And then you can see it extends west all the way to the city limits along the West Michigan corridor. Go to the next one. Yep, then it goes north through Irving Park, through Bronson Battle Creek's site, and up to KCC. And then it goes east, and I think of this kind of as a manufacturing area, picks up the Post facility and the Kellogg facilities. And then it goes south along Capitol Avenue Southwest, and mostly this portion of the district only includes properties that have frontage on Capitol Avenue Southwest. And then go to the last one. And then you can see it touches the north end of Gogwak Lake. And the reason that the DDA extends to the north end of Gogwak Lake is because many years back, and this probably goes 30 years or more back, the board was thinking at the time that if there was ever any development potential there, it might be helpful to have that within the DDA boundaries. So the DDA has extended to the north end of Gogwak Lake for many, many years, although I would say that most of the activity in the DDA has been in and around the core downtown. But the district itself is really quite large. Any more comments from council members? Okay. We do have public comment on our agenda, so I'd like to give folks who are in the audience here today an opportunity to speak. Here's what we'll ask you to do if you want to speak. Please come up to the microphone here and announce your name and address for the record, just so if we do need to reach out to you, we know who made comments here today. I will ask each of you, if you would, please just limit your comments to 3 minutes. That would be pretty typical of public comment in our city commission settings, for example. And we'd like to give anybody who would like to provide comment today an opportunity to talk. So is there anybody, just raise your hand if you're ready to go, and we'll acknowledge you and welcome your comments. So the gentleman over here, yeah, all the way over. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yes, please come up. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Jolene Weiner-Vatter. My address is 355 Columbia Avenue West.
And go right ahead with your comments if you'd like.
Thank you. Has there been any studies done to date regarding the development of the north end of Gogak Lake and its environmental implications regarding the species that currently live there, which include geese, hawks, and eagles that are all protected under the U.S. Protect Act, as well as the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which is with Mexico and Canada. That is their habitat, particularly for the hawks. They live there their entire lives. Any impact regarding development in the pictures that you're showing destroys the trees and their living situation and nesting for both the eagles, hawks, and geese. And then that would also increase the stress on the water and the condition of the water and the environment and the species that they live off of. So before, although the state has the ability to make regulations, they have to be more restrictive than federal, and federal does protect that. So what, if any, studies have been done, and when will they be done if they have not been done?
Yeah, there have been no studies at this point, and probably, I can't give you a timeline on when a study might occur, because a study would likely only occur if we were moving forward with some type of a development. I would expect that would be a front-end requirement before we got into any type of development. So if a project was proposed to move forward, I would expect the study would occur at that time.
Does your project or current proposals even list or acknowledge that those species are there and that they are protected?
No, right now all we have is just one conceptual vision for what a reimagining of that area could look like. But as you suggest, there'd be a lot of hoops to jump through before any development could actually occur.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm Dale Pitcher. I live at 355 West Columbia also, not with Jolene. But I have, I'm excited to see what's going on with the development. I think this is good. It's good for the city. I think most of us here would like to see a little bit, have an opportunity to at least digest some of the things that are going on before we actually go forward to the next phase. I guess with the lack of a quorum, it's not going to go ahead until we have a quorum. But I do like John's questioning. You came up with some pretty good questions to ask, and I think those are concerns that most of us have. So, but I am glad to see that we're looking at development, but I don't want to see anything that's going to be hasty, that's going to impact the lifestyles of the people that live along that lake area. Another thing that I did want to find out was on the study, without seeing it, is there any consideration to the properties on the north side of Columbia Avenue? We're talking primarily on the south side of Columbia Avenue. Is there anything considered for the north side of Columbia Avenue?
Yeah, we don't have any specific proposals being considered at this time.
Was that included in the the drawing?
No, the conceptual plan or the sub-area plan for the north end of Golwack Lake focused primarily on the properties.
Okay,
on
so
the
if
south
that's
side.
going to be a development area, that's a main corridor, that should probably be considered to include that north side of Columbia Avenue. And I would suggest that maybe that be considered included on it as well. The other thing was on the downtown area. You mentioned that the downtown area was the focus. Southwest Capitol Avenue is a corridor that comes into it. Right now, that area, to me, is so blighted. It's embarrassing to drive down that southwest corridor to the downtown area. Yet we are trying to develop that downtown area, and it doesn't seem like we're going about it quite the right way. We're focusing on the downtown, but everyone that comes in off of I-94 hits Columbia Avenue, and then from that point on, it just seems to go downhill. And I think there's got to be some consideration about the the amenities that we offer going into the downtown area. Columbia Avenue is a main thoroughfare, and I think that area going over to the Penetrator is another area that seems to be neglected by the city or the county, and I don't know who's responsible for that, but that's a concern also.
Yeah, thank you.
My 3 minutes are up.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else that would like to make comment? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Amy Robertson. I live in Marshall. However, I have a condo at 355 West Columbia. I use it on the weekends. So my question is, I just looked. This property is zoned T3, which is neighborhood commercial. And so this development is legitimate within a T3. However, I would like the committee to consider what is revenues, what is development, and by providing a beach for the public, which increase the costs for the city, obviously, trash, maintenance, supervision, police, versus developing it, the beachfront area as additional homes or additional condos would generate revenue in terms of property taxes. And the beach itself is not a revenue generating endeavor. I would like you to seriously consider that a beach there doesn't make an awful lot of development sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes, sir.
My name's Steve Thomas. I live at 225 Columbia Avenue West. First of all, I'd just like to say, John, thank you. You hit most of, I think, the Bay Village condominiums questions to a T, and I appreciate your speaking up for us and getting this conversation rolling, and it's very much appreciated. The thing I would ask the board or the committees to do is that when we're dealing with people's homes, and this doesn't just pertain to the north end of Gogwak Lake, but in your map you have many areas that I'm sure homeowners are in, and to be honest, none of us knew about this until we found out from our sister condominium that we were having a meeting. So is there a process? I know you said that there was, you'd be engaging the homeowners and things like that, but when we're talking about people's homes and livelihoods and things like that, why aren't we going forward and notifying them by mail? I don't get the Inquirer. I wouldn't pay for the Inquirer, to be honest with you, because there's nothing there. I mean, you have a couple of pages and maybe some notifications, but when we're dealing with homes and where people live, I would like to see the city actually reach out to those homeowners and say, listen, here's a notice, please come and see us. Please come to the meeting. Because I think, we have a few homeowners from my condominium, or where I live, that are here, but, I think we need to be more interactive with the public when we're dealing with people's homes. And John, thank you again. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Steve, thank you for those comments. Those are great comments. And you raise a point that I think is probably worth noting too in the actual draft language of the plan. And the plan really has two components. It has the project list, which is all of the various projects that the DDA would consider investing in. And then there's this technical plan that responds to the exact information required by the statute. And in the statute, they do ask the question, do you plan to displace property owners, homeowners, and that kind of thing with the plan? And I can tell you that we have indicated in our draft plan that we have no plans to displace anyone. So that raises Steve raises a very good point, which is, okay, but we see a conceptual drawing that makes it look like you do. So I appreciate you raising that point, and just did want to acknowledge that we are communicating to the state in our plan that we do not have any intention to displace anybody. Other comments? Yes, ma'am, right here, I think. Yes, right there, yeah.
Hi, I'm Lisa Antenhoff, and I live on the north end of the lake, but at 16 Hiawatha Drive. And I'm also concerned that we weren't adequately informed of this project, even though looking at this, I live just outside of that area, but I think it also impacts all the other property owners on not only the north end of the lake, but the whole lake, especially when, as was discussed earlier, the implications of the environment. And I think another thing that really needs to be taken into consideration when a study is done is safety. We have a boat launch now that is very busy, and if you put a public beach right next to a busy boat launch, personally, I think that's a recipe for disaster, and I think that also needs to be considered.
Good, thank you. Thank you for your comments. Other comments? Yes, I see a gentleman over here.
Hi, I'm Ken Ropp from 355 Columbia Avenue. And I've been attending the Lake Association meetings, and they knew nothing about this when I talked to them, because I thought it was a lake project. I find the graphics terrible. You can't tell where you're at. You can't identify what is there. And I don't understand how you can put out graphics like that and not have desirable, concrete identification. So, do you have better graphics? I'd appreciate having a copy. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. Other comments? Oh, over here, yes.
Mary Corsi, 251 Columbia Avenue West. My question is, I'm John's wife, so of course I could look at the information in a little more depth maybe. And so as I'm noticing all of the financing and the set-aside dollars that go along with these projects, I guess I'm wondering, are those dollars already committed? And then if they are, then when I got to the bottom and I noticed the amount of debt service amount, which was roughly half almost of what was committed, I felt a little horrible about that and just was curious to know, how deciding to both allocate those dollars and then to use debt is a part of the project that should be, I think, considered very carefully.
Yeah. And just to clarify too, and make sure I'm on the same page with you with your comments regarding debt too. So the debt figure you see in the summary at the end of the packet represents the current debt that the DDA has. So that is from legacy projects. So
Gotcha.
they have an
Even more-
ongoing debt obligation.
More
That
scary.
yeah, an ongoing debt
Don't
obligation.
add, please.
Yeah, that consumes a lot of what the DDA collects on an annual basis. And so that does limit the amount of project, or dollars that are available for projects. So that debt figure you saw shows the existing debt, and then the overall figure obviously was the sum of all the projects that were identified in the plan. And obviously, the DDA does not capture anywhere near enough money to do all of those projects. So what it does allow us to do is if a project becomes a priority, for example, many of you may have heard we recently got a fairly significant allocation from the state for river restoration. So that river restoration project is in what we call the south end subdevelopment area, and obviously that's going to elevate that project to the top of our priority list, simply because there's an opportunity to leverage dollars there. So
Thank you.
that's helpful, thank you. Yeah. Other comments? Yes.
Janice Cummins, 355 Columbia Avenue West. We've lived as retirees at the condo we're at for about 6 years. When we moved in, it was a restaurant next door, and the trees, the lovely trees, blocked the view, so it felt very private where we are. And I'm just concerned about development there rather than a restaurant that would, wipe out the aesthetics and affect property value negatively.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes, sir.
I'm Melvin Norman. I have property at 225 West Columbia. I live at 355 West Columbia. And Ted touched on this. We have a horrible traffic problem there. Traffic is tied up. We have two ways to get out of 355, and sometimes they're both blocked. And I don't know what you can do about it, but I would think a public beach would snarl the traffic even worse than what it is today. I don't know what the answer is. I'm not a traffic engineer. I don't know what the answer is to alleviate the problem we got now, but we've got a real problem. And anything, I realize the old Lakewood Ranch or the old Lakewood Inn property is a valuable piece of property. Something has to be done with it. I'm just hoping it is something that's not going to make the traffic problem even worse than what it is now. And I think a public beach could be a complete disaster. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? I'm not seeing anyone else. Okay. Well, first of all, let me thank all of you for coming down today. We do truly appreciate it. We appreciate your comments. It was the purpose of the committee to gather these types of comments so that they could then be shared with the board and incorporated into consideration as the plan is approved. So we really do appreciate you coming down. Any other questions or comments from committee members based on what we've heard today?
Ted, I actually have something. I know when they made changes where I live, we were notified really late in the process. And it was Neighborhood Incorporated that came to us. And that's how we first got involved. But I think listening to these individuals and their concerns, I understand it because we went through it. And it was like, it was well beyond where we should have been involved to begin with. But what's Neighborhood Incorporated's role with working with the Lake Association or bringing those people on early?
Yeah. So that's a good question. NIBC probably would not have a role in this particular project. That responsibility would fall on the administrative entity for the DDA, which is the city in this case. So anything related to the DDA's investment in any one of the subdevelopment areas would likely come from city staff.
The only other question or comment I have is you asked this group here to comment on projects and the dollars that you have projected for various projects, but they seem to be so at the top of the outline. If there's a way that we can get a little bit more detail as to specifically what and where would you spend these money in these various development areas, that would be very helpful.
Sure.
Because each development seemed like it was a cookie cutter allotment of finances. Each one said the same thing, basically. So it's, for me, it's not specific enough for me to provide you with any type of feedback that would be valuable other than just rubber stamping it.
All right. And so that's a good point, and I can provide a little clarification there too. With each one of our sub areas, we do have specific developments that are unique to that particular geography, and then as was mentioned, then we typically have kind of some generic areas, generic infrastructure areas, and as you mentioned, they're very similar across the various sub areas. Sometimes it is a little bit difficult for us to get very specific about what projects are going to be, because we don't know what's going to come up, so we just set aside funds in a general category so that if a project does come up, it's in the plan per se, without being terribly specific. So I definitely understand your point there, but I would also mention that the plan will likely include some fairly generic references to public infrastructure programming and that kind of thing to give us some flexibility.
Okay. And one more.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No problem.
There's only one more meeting, which is next week. After that, the group of individuals here, I'm assuming, is terminated.
Actually, the way the committee was put together is your terms are open-ended. So
Oh, is it?
you at this point, you exist into perpetuity.
Oh, okay. All right. I was not aware of that.
Yeah, which creates an opportunity for us to, as projects come up, for example, maybe a meaningful development did come together on the north end, we can convene the DACC to provide advice and counsel as we go forward. So,
Okay.
no, the terms are open-ended. Unfortunately, we've got a few seats that we need to fill, so we'll probably go through that process. And just a reminder, if anybody's interested, please let me know, but just a reminder, you do actually have to live within the boundaries of the district. Thank you. Okay, we've had our public comment, we've had our comments from the committee. Let me just talk real quick about next steps. The DDA board is going to meet on July 25th. I think Ryan here informs me that meeting will be held in person at did you say the airport conference facility? Yes. Mm-hmm.
Technically, it's a virtual meeting, and it's not open to public, physically come to it. It's just going to be streamed on YouTube.
Okay, well, we'll get that clarified for the group, but the next meeting of the DACC is actually next Wednesday, and in theory, here's what would happen at that meeting. We would assemble all of the comments that we have received to date, and we're going to give the group a summary of those comments so that they can view that, and then there will be a resolution that was drafted by the DDA's attorney that basically asks the board to accept the comment, so we got to make sure it reflects everything that we've heard, and then recommend those comments and the plan to the DDA board for consideration. So that this group will do that at their meeting on the 20th. After that goes to the DDA board on the 25th. And then once the DDA board is ready to advance that to the city commission, then we'll set a public hearing before the City Commission, and I expect that to occur at the City Commission's second meeting in September, and the Commission meets on the first and the third Tuesday of each month. So if you wanted to participate in that public hearing, you would come to the City Commission. The City Commission meetings are right here in Chambers at 7 p.m. on Tuesday evening. It would be the third Tuesday of the month of September. The 20... The 20th, so that would be the 20th of September. And then the commission from there would take public comment, and then they would consider both introducing and adopting the plan at their meetings in October. So there will still be several opportunities for folks to comment if you desire to do that before the commission approves a plan that would be submitted to the state. Okay, I think that is it for today. In order for us to actually take action on the plan next week, we will have to have a quorum to do that. We'll have minutes from this meeting and minutes obviously from the previous meeting that we'll distribute to the DACC members so you can look at the comments and hopefully be prepared to take action at our next meeting. Thank you all again for attending today, and we are adjourned.